starting with a completely blank vault, I'm going to move the starred pane down the bottom, move the tags pane across so it's at the top, and the outline core plugin pane also next to the tags. Then when I go to the files, I'm going to add a new folder, call it journal. Then I'm going to add a couple more folders inside of that, the daily folder and weekly folder for the journal notes. Then a template folder for template files. Then add a daily template file inside of the template folder. Go to core plugins inside of the settings and make sure the daily notes core plugin is activated. And if it is, it will then show inside the core plugin settings. Going in there, I can see the default date format. Add a note file location, so that's the daily folder we've just made, and then add the daily template file so it knows what file to look for. You can open the daily note on startup, but this will change with the plugins we'll add later on. So we can open today's daily note, and you can see it's got the year, month, day as the title of the note, and it's been put in the daily folder. Now when we go to community plugins in the settings, we can browse and then search for calendar. And this calendar plugin will let us go through all of these daily notes using a clickable calendar. So we're going to install and enable the calendar plugin. Now it's enabled, it will show in the right sidebar or somewhere in the vault with a calendar icon. I'm going to move it to the left so it's there as default. Now when I delete the daily note, and I can recreate that daily note by clicking in the calendar, and it uses the daily template. Much easier. Now I'm going to go again to the community plugins and install recent files. And this is going to give me a list of all the recently opened files I've used. Now, inside the settings, you can change the list length to 50, 60, 100. I'm going to leave it to default. Then drag that plugin all the way down the bottom of the left sidebar. Now when I go to a different file, so the daily template file, you can see it's in the recent files. Then when I go to the daily note, you've got the daily note in there as well. So we've got the 14th and the daily template. If we go to the settings and go to the calendar community plugin settings, I can change the start day of the week, which for me is Monday. I'm then going to remove the confirm box because I don't want to confirm every time I make a new daily note. I'm going to show the week number, and then it gives me the weekly note settings. Now, we don't at the moment have a weekly template, but we do have a weekly folder. However, we're going to use another community plugin called Periodic Notes. So I'm going to install, then enable the Periodic Notes community plugin. Then inside the settings, it gives me the option to migrate, and this is migrating the daily note plugin settings over to the periodic notes. You can see all the settings are the same, the daily template's the same, the daily folder's the same, but now we have the weekly notes option, which we didn't have before. So we're going to add the weekly folder as an option, but now we need a weekly template, so go to the templates folder, make a new file, weekly template, just for ease of finding it. Now when you click on the weekly button inside the calendar, it creates a weekly note inside of the weekly folder, but we don't have that template set up yet, so going into the settings, weekly note template, and then adding in that weekly template. And this plugin does expand to monthly notes, quarterly notes, yearly notes if you want them in the future. But before we can add something to the template, we want to enhance what we can actually add. So we're going to install Templater, enable Templater, go to the options, and then again, add the template folder, so the location folder, to the plugin. Then we also want to add one of the settings, the trigger templater on new file creation. What this means is when we push on the calendar to create a new file, it will trigger the templates we're going to make. Now, when we go down to enable folder templates, we want to add the daily folder and the daily template, then the weekly folder and the weekly template. So when a new file is made in the daily folder, the daily template will be used, and the same will happen for the weekly folder and weekly template. So if I add testing text to the weekly template and create a file in the weekly folder, it adds the testing text because that was in the template. And the same would happen if I made a file in the daily note. But in the daily note, I want it to link between the day before and the day after, so yesterday and tomorrow with some nice arrows in the middle. But for the arrows to show the way I want them, I need to change the font inside of the vault. So I'm going to go to the settings and change it to the Inter font. And I'm going to do this for all three. You can customize it how you want, but this works for me and is what I use in my personal vault as well. And you can see now those symbols have turned into an arrow that looks slightly nicer. I also want a link to the weekly summary. So at the moment we've just got text placeholders of what's going on. So I have a link in theory to yesterday, a link in theory to tomorrow, and then a link for the weekly summary. Now I also want sections. So my journal for whatever it is that I'm going to journal, and then a section for tasks of the day. So tasks in the day that I can add to this file. Now, how do I make the link from yesterday to today link up with the days in the calendar? Well, I'm going to go to the daily template, copy the journal and task headings, so that's in every single daily note, and then I'm going to add some code-like elements. And what we're going to do is going to add a link, backlink with the brackets, then direct it to a folder path. So we want the file to be made inside of the journal daily folder, because this is a link to yesterday. Then I'm going to use smaller than % tp dot date, and this is using the templater community plugin options, then dot now, and this is looking for the date right now. Then it's going to look for the format. So in this case we want it to be the same format as the daily note plugin, or in this case periodic notes plugin, so year, month, day. And because this is a link to yesterday, we want it to be the day before, so -1. And we don't necessarily know that -1 is going to be today, or if we've made a date in the future, is that going to be today -1 or the file date -1? So I'm going to put TP file title, then that format again, so it's going to look at the file date and -1 rather than today's date -1. Then I'm going to close out the templater script with a % and greater than. But I don't want it to show the actual day inside of my file, so I'm going to put an alias for yesterday. And if I change this to the source mode view, you can see everything that's going on, and this is only in the daily template. So the templater script is in the template that will generate the correct link inside of the file when I make it. And you can see the format in the periodic notes is the same as the templater format we put inside of the daily template. Now when I go to the calendar, add a new file, the 15th, you can see it's created that note for yesterday. So the 14th, and that is a link. It's a backlink or internal link to yesterday. If I go to the reading view and hover over, you can see the page preview to yesterday's note. I click it and it takes me to yesterday, i.e. the 14th. Now to do this for tomorrow, I can do pretty much the same thing. So I'm going to copy, add some arrows in the middle, and then paste. And now at the moment it's going one day before whatever the file date is. So get rid of the minus to add a day, and then I'm going to change the alias from yesterday to tomorrow. So it's going to show tomorrow instead of the date, and yesterday instead of the date. Now when I create a new daily note, say the 13th, the yesterday is 12 and tomorrow is 14, because it's looking at the 13th as the file title, -1 date, add 1 date, and now we've got links from yesterday to tomorrow. So now we need to put a week summary link in, and it's going to be the same sort of principle, so the two brackets to add a link, using the smaller than % to activate a templater script, but this time we're going to drop down into something called moment, which is code stuff that you don't really need to know, but we're going to use moment tp.file.title, so we're looking for the file title. We're going to format the file title in whatever date format it is. And if you remember, the periodic notes date format for the week is slightly different. It uses different letters, so we've got G, 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 G for the year, a big W for just a W, and then WW for the week number. And if you go to settings, periodic notes, you can see it's the same weekly format. Now we're going to close out the template script with a percent and greater than, and now when I go to the 14th, it's going to create the new daily note and link to the weekly note, which you can see in the calendar is week 2 of 2023. The daily links still work, the weekly links still work, it's just slightly different scripts. Now, inside the weekly template, it's the exact same principle, but it's now on a weekly scale. Now, a weekly file is in the weekly folder, so the path is going to be journal/weekly/ then whatever the file name of the week is. So again, we need templater to help us out, smaller than %, use moment because it's a little bit more accurate essentially, then tp.file.title, so looking for the file title again. Now, this is the previous week, so we're going to subtract, and in this case, we actually need to specify and write out what we're subtracting. So we're subtracting 1, comma, and then in quotes, week. So it knows we're taking 1 week off of the file title date. And we're going to format that in the week format. So that's using the G's, using the W, and then using the 2 W's afterwards. Then again, we want to close it out with the percent and the greater than. And again, we also want to add an alias. So I'm going to use the pipe symbol, previous week. And something else you can also do is add anything into the alias because it's just text, which means if you can access the emoji menu, which for me is Windows full stop, you can then add in any icons or emojis inside this, and I'm going to put the back arrow before previous week, so it just changes the look of that link inside of the file, and you can select any arrow, any emoji, or anything you want that goes into a text file. Now, for next week, again, same principle, copy, paste, but I need to change previous to next, so I know it's actually next week, and then I also need to change the subtract to add, because I want it to be next week, so I'm going to add 1 week to the current week, which is being found by the file title. So for example, if we click on week 1 in the calendar, week 1 is in theory the current week, so it's going to generate the week before, which is the week 52, 2022, and next week would be week 2 in 2023, according to the file title. And both of those files are created in the weekly folder because that's the path we've added. Now, for me, I like to see when the week started and when the week is ended. So I'm going to add again another template script because I want it to be all automatic using moment tp.file.title, so it's relevant to the file. Now, the start of week is start of, but I need to specify that I'm looking for the week. Now, in this case, it's ISO week, and that specifies the week, so we're looking for the start of the week of the file date, and we're going to format that, and this is where you can customize this in any way you want. I personally prefer capital MMM space capital DD, and this is going to give me the first 3 letters of the month and then the day. Close out the script, and what I'm going to do is just put a dash and the same thing, but instead of start of week, I want end of week. So I'll have the first day of the week and then the end of the week as a heading at the top of the weekly file. So if I now go to week 1, having deleted it, you can see it's generated a template again with January 2nd, January 8th, and that's Monday to Sunday of that week. Then if I hover over next week, it goes to that week too, but because it was already made, it doesn't have the template. So I delete the file, recreate the file, and now it's reloaded the template script with the 9th and the 15th as the start and end, linking to the previous week, which is the week 1, the 2nd to the 8th. In addition to that, inside the weekly template, I actually want to see what days of the weeks they were. So I want to link the days of the week inside of the weekly file. I'm going to go to source mode so you can see everything that's going on if you do want to copy this like word for word, character for character. And again, we're going to use the backlink brackets. Then the path is journal daily because we're looking for the daily notes. Then we want to open another template script, but this time I'm not going to use the TP date now. I'm going to use moment because I can then copy and paste this down 7 times for each day, making it just easier to make. And we're going to use moment tp.file.title start of, very similar to the week, but this time I'm going to do ISO week and then I'm going to add something. So I don't just want the first day of the week. In this case, it's going to be Monday, so I could leave it as start of week, but I'm going to add 0 and then days. Now, again, like I say, I don't have to do this, but it makes copying and pasting a little bit quicker, a little bit easier. And then I want to format this in the daily format. Now, for me, again, I'm using the default. You could change this, but I just use the alias instead of changing the format and overcomplicating it. And now what I'm going to do is close out the templater script, then add my alias, so put the pipe symbol and then Monday, because this is the first day of the week, and then I can copy, Control-C, and then paste 6 other times. What I now need to do is change the days, so for Tuesday, add 1 day, Wednesday, add 2 days, add 3 days, and then change the days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then, when I create the weekly templates, it's got all of those days that link to the daily note. But if the daily note's not made, I then need to either click on the file to make it. So if I click on Wednesday, it will create the 18th. That's the daily note on the 18th, which is the Wednesday of that week. So week 3. Now when I go to the 3rd week, you can see Wednesday's a different color because that file's been made and the other files are faded out because it hasn't been made yet. Now, inside my days, I want to be able to track habits, and I could do this in multiple ways. My personal preference is to use YAML or front matter, loads of other words for it, but I'm going to add breakfast, and that allows me to track the breakfast information and lunch, dinner, sleep, gym, well-being, and all that information, now it's added in the template, goes into all of the files when I make those files. Installing the Dataview community plugin and the database folder community plugin lets me firstly query or search through all of those daily files, and the database folder will create a database-like view for the folder file search. So when I go to the daily folder, right click and click on new database folder, it's then searching through all those files, so the 3 days we've got, and it's now giving me the results of them in a table view. To add a column, the column is the YAML or front matter information. So we've got breakfast as an option, dinner as an option, and I'm going to choose those 3, so the meals as text, because that could be a calorie intake, but the gym, I want to say, did I go to it, yes or no? So it's going to be a checkbox, and the same for sleep, and then the same for well-being, and you can see there are lots of other options for each of those columns or front matter YAML information inside of those files. If you want to customize the columns, you can go to settings and change and alter the settings to suit what you want. But in this case, I just want simple text and simple tick boxes, which is nice and easy to edit and see. Now, if I double click on the cell, I can add a number or words. Now, if I do want to track calories, maybe I just want to keep it to a number checkbox. But if I look at the file, I don't see the metadata or YAML. I have to actually go onto the file to see that information. Now, I don't want to leave it as an untitled database, so I'm going to rename it Habit Database. Now, I also want to make it easy to access, so I'm going to star this, and it appears in the left sidebar, which gives me quick access to the Habit Database, making habits easy to add. Now, because those breakfast, dinner, lunch sections might be calories, I only want it to be number, so I've changed the number property. Then when I tick things off, the gym and well-being are true because it's ticked. And it would be false if it's not there, but sleep, you can see it's false, but it's not appearing in the file. And that's because it wasn't added in the template when we first created that file, but when we edited the information, database folder just added it for us, which is really helpful, but I still want to be able to know what wasn't done. So the false information, which means either you'd need to recreate the file with templater, or, as you can see when you go into the settings, add that information through DB folder. So if I create a new file, the 15th, that's got all the templated information in, so the new reading and study stuff, we can then go to DB folder, add reading, and then we want that to be a checkbox. Then go in again, add study, then again a checkbox. And because this is in a file, DB folder knows that it's in one of, which means it can be in all of those files, which means if I now go and click on that file, there's nothing there yet, but when I click on study, then go back to the 14th, study is now true. It still doesn't have that false information though, so I have to click and then click off. So it was true, then it was false, so it's added in reading, and then it's added it as false. But what if I want to see those results inside of my week as an overview? Well, I can go to the weekly template, add a heading section, overview, and I'm going to use Dataview, which is the query thing the database folder is using on the back end and hiding it. And I'm going to create a table, very similar to DB folder, but this is in the weekly file. So this is week specific, not an overview of the entire folder, just the week. I'm going to remove the ID, so without ID, so it doesn't say file, and I'm going to rename it, so file.link, so it still links to the days, and I want to call it day. And this is like an alias just inside of the query. Now, what I also want to do is make sure it's looking for only the daily files. I don't want the weekly files in here as well, so from journal/daily. So it's looking at files inside the daily folder only. But we've got the habit database, and we've got days that won't be in a specific week. So we need a way to say, okay, this day is in this week. So we're going to go to the daily template, and again, using templater and the YAML information, we can say week, and then moment TP file title format week. So that's going to add the week format into every daily file. So now, in the query for the overview, we can look for that information. So filter where week equals today's week. So if we delete the first week file and reload that, you can see we've got the overview and there is no result. There are no days. But if we click on Sunday, we've now got the 8th. It's added the week, first week in 2023, and now it's going to show inside of the overview because the 8th is in week 1. But we don't have any of those habits in columns yet, so we need to add that to the Dataview query. For the first three, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they are just number properties. So I only really need to see what the number is. So I'm going to type breakfast as, because I don't want to see breakfast as the actual column title, I'm going to use an emoji, that's my personal preference, and I'm going to add that in speech marks. So I now have an alias for breakfast, and I need to make sure I put a comma after each line, so it knows that they're different things. I'm going to add lunch and dinner as well, but the other properties are checkbox properties, so they're true or false, and I want that personally to be a tick or a cross. So I'm going to use choice, open brackets, then the name of the property, which in this case is sleep, then the first argument is true. So what do I want it to say if it's true? In this case, I want to say it's a tick emoji, and then if it's false, that's the second argument, which is just a red cross. And again, at the end, I want to change the alias or change what the column looks like to an emoji. And again, we're going to put that in speech marks, and I'm going to add, in this case, just a sleeping emoji person, and I can then copy and paste this and add in all of the other habits. And then I actually want to sort the results by the file name, because the file name is the date of the day, and I want to have that in ascending order. So now when I click out, because this is the template, it's not going to do anything, but when I delete week 1 and then I add week 1 again, we now have an error because I did something wrong. I missed one of those commas. So now when I delete it and do it again, and I generate that new weekly overview, you can see you've got the X's and you've got no entries for all of the numbers. But if we go to the habit database and add some information in, so there's the 8th, we tick the gym and we tick the well-being, and then we go back to the week 1 file, you can see you've got the well-being and exercise are ticked done. So it works in the habits, it works in the daily notes, it works in the weekly notes, and in the Dataview overview. This then means if we go to create a file, so we've created Thursday, which is the 5th, go back to week 1, we've got the 5th, and that's had nothing done because it's generated the template as all false. But if I want to change that information without going to the database, I can use another plugin called Metadata Menu. So I'm going to install, enable, and what this plugin does is it uses Dataview again as like a search background, but it gives us clickable options and menus to change the information in lots of different places inside of our Obsidian Vault. Now, when we go to the settings, we actually need to set this up a bit. So, a file class is like a schema or a list of rules and commands that this plugin is going to use, which means there needs to be some information stored for metadata to be used. And in this case, we're going to go to the template folder, create a new folder, call it file class. This could be another main folder. You can store this where you want. I've just done it in the template as the example. Now when I go to the settings, I can choose the class file path as the file class folder. That can be named what you want. You can select how you want it. And the filed class field alias I'll show later on, but when we create a new note in that new folder, we're going to call it daily because we want all of our daily notes to be a certain type, a certain file class, and the daily file class will be linked with all of the daily notes. If we go to the settings, you can see we can right click on the tab, go all the way down, manage fields, and then it says map daily with tag. And this allows us to map this daily file class with a tag. So when we add the daily tag to any file, it adds the file class as well. Now, this table Dataview view is just a Dataview query of all of the things in the file class. The file class fields. A field is a column in the DB folder database or any YAML front matter information in a file. So if we go to add a field and call it breakfast, it's going to be the same as the metadata YAML front matter of the daily notes file, which is the same as the columns inside of the Dataview query and the same as the columns inside of the DB folder view. And again, because breakfast is number, we want it to be specifically for numbers. If we move over to the file class settings, you can see we've got some options, and I want to map with tag. I could map it with different tag names. I can change the parent file class, but in this case, I'm just going to map it with a tag. So now daily is the tag it's looking for to say, yes, this file has this class and this information. But I don't have that tag in my daily template yet. So go to the daily template, add tag, and then daily as an option. Now, any file with the daily tag is part of that class. Now, if we go to the 5th, delete that file, and then create it again from the calendar, because we're generating that template again, it's going to add the daily tag to it, and now you can see that purple icon. You click on the purple icon, and you can edit the field that we added, which was the breakfast field, and because this is a number, you can only add a number, so 16, push the tick, and now it's added 16 into the breakfast property, column, front matter, YAML, metadata, all mean the same thing. Then when we go to the habit database, you can see that icon is there again, which we can use to edit the information. When we go to the weekly overview, you can see the file icon is there again, and it's also inside the Dataview query, so you can edit any habit tracking information from any place that you can see that clipboard icon. Now, when we go into the daily file class page file, you can see the field. The field is all that gobbledygook at the bottom, which you don't really need to understand because you can do that through the file class fields setting page, which you can see here. And we're going to add another field because we've got other habits, so lunch. And again, we want this to be accept a number because it's a number. We can add some options in there as well, but I'm going to keep this nice and simple, and it's change the daily file class file, and I'm not going to go through the settings. I'm going to copy and paste because it's the same thing, change the start to dinner, and now we have our 3 number fields inside of the metadata menu options. And you see you can change the icon from clipboard to something else, but it's just easy to keep it the same. Now we need to add the other options. But if you remember, they're different. They are tick boxes. They're true or false. So when we add the field name, say the gym field name, instead of it being a number field type, we want it to be true or false. And you can see it's got rid of the optional options, and it's got a different color because it's not a number, it's a boolean, which basically means true or false. And again, I'm going to go to the daily file class and do a simple copy paste. So copy, paste, gym down however many times you've got your habits. Rename the start, so we've got sleep, we've also got well-being, we've also got... Now when I navigate to the daily folder, I can see those files. If I click on the icon, I get all of those options to edit and change. I can go to the right side and click true or click false because it's reading the information in the file straight away. So I can see most of them are empty. I tick some true, I tick some false, and the fifth, if we go to the habit database, the fifth now has that information showing. You can see we've got those two ticked and the others are false. I can still tick them here and I can then go to the icon and change them off, but it gives me more flexibility on how, where, when I can edit the information inside of a file rather than having to go there. And of course, this then shows inside of the weekly overview, so every change you make is always shown inside the overview. But if you're going in the past, you might think, well, I don't have the daily tag in those past days. You can still add a file class, and this is where that file class setting inside of the metadata menu option shows, because when you add the file class, it says file class as the YAML or property, and then says what it is, so it's daily. Now, when you right-click on a file, you get all of these options as right-clickable menus, of course, but I personally don't do that. I keep it nice and simple and work inside the pages. For all of the tasks that go inside the daily notes, you might just work on one day. But if you want to get an overview of what's going on in the week, maybe you want an agenda. So I'm going to create a weekly agenda with loads of headings. Then add the tasks plugin, the natural language dates plugin, the quick add plugin, and I'm also going to add the Commander plugin because all of these plugins together work very well in adding tasks with the tasks, adding natural language options, so today, tomorrow, in 3 days, Commander giving a button option, and quick add making it quicker, basically. So inside of our agenda file, we're going to add a tasks query code block. Look for tasks that are not done, due this Monday, because we're in the Monday section, hide the due date, and sort by priority. Of course, this is fully customizable, but now when we go to a daily note and add a task block, we get an autocorrect. We get a date, so I'm going to click on date. Let's go today. Let's go high priority. Now, I don't want it to be recurring. You could make it recurring. I want to name the task as well, so let's call it just tests because it's a test. Now when we go back to the agenda, let's just make it a new pane so we don't have to go backwards and forwards and have a look at the agenda. At the moment, it's not showing in the task query because the 14th isn't this Monday, it's Saturday. So if we change the date to the 9th, because that is this Monday, so 09, then leave the line, it's going to show the result inside the query. That is this Monday. But if you don't want that link thing that it shows, you'll actually need to add some CSS, which when you go into the Appearance tab, go all the way down to the bottom, you can see some snippets. If you click on the folder, it creates the folder inside of your Vault. Now, I use VS Code because it's free and easy, so install or download VS Code, open up your Obsidian Vault, then go to the snippets folder you've just made, type tasks or call it whatever you want, .css. Then you'll need to add some CSS into this file. I'll leave a link in the description below to all of this gobbledygook. And once you've got that file inside of your Vault, make sure you've saved it so it has the actual saved file inside of the Vault. Then when you go back into your settings, you'll be able to see the file inside of the CSS snippets. If you can't, push the reload button, then enable or turn it on. And now the task query looks like it's got a link rather than that backlink, which to me is better. It's just nicer to see. And when you click it, it actually takes you to where the task was stored. But what about future tasks? Well, you can add a section at the bottom of the agenda if you want for future tasks. So let's say this task is actually next Monday, say it's the 16th. Change the date to the 16th, and now we need a query that's looking for all of the future tasks. So again, making things easy, let's do a copy and paste underneath the future tasks. And because we don't want this to be this Monday, we're going to change that to after next Sunday. So it's looking for the current Sunday and saying anything after that. I also want to group these tasks by the date. You can then customize this query to look however you want. I'm personally going to hide the priority because I don't want to see that with future tasks. I then also want to hide the due date. You can see I've been specific there and said due date. I don't know what date I'm grouping by yet, so when I leave it, it doesn't actually say anything because I haven't said, hey, group by this date, because it could be a scheduled date, a due date, start date. Let's go with due date. And now it's going to show me the date and the day the task is. So you can see it's the 16th and it's Monday, and that's a future task. If we change that to the 17th, it will change the date and the day inside of the task query result saying 17th on Tuesday, which is very useful. Now, when we go to the Monday, I just copy and paste this down to all the other days and then change it from this Monday to this Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so it shows the appropriate tasks in the appropriate day. I'm going to drag it into the sidebar, and now I have my agenda in the sidebar. But if I don't want to see the agenda title, like the file title name, I can go to the appearance settings, go show inline title, and turn that off. Now it's only showing the headings that I have inside of the file rather than the file title, still with those queries working at the bottom and all throughout the page. So now we've got the task agenda query. How do I make adding tasks easier? Well, that's using those plugins we've just installed, and we're going to go to the Quick Add plugin. We're going to add a choice, in this case, new task, and because we're going to add just some lines to a file, it's going to be a capture. And I'm going to change the settings of this capture choice, go to the file name, and again, very similar to the templater, I want to add a path. Now, this is a daily capture, so we're going to go journal, daily, and now I want to say the date, so it wants to be today's date. I want to put it on today's daily note, so I'm going to add brackets, date, and this is going to be template information that just puts in today's current date. I want it to create the file if it doesn't exist, so it's going to create the daily note if it doesn't exist in the right place because we've got the path there, and then I also want it to use the template. So if the quick add creates the file, it makes sure it adds the template information in there as well, but to make sure that template is right, you can't actually select it. You need to make sure the cases are correct. So at the moment I have a capital T. When I go back, you can see I typed a lowercase t, so I need to change that and make sure it's exactly correct. Otherwise it will throw an error at you. Now I want to insert these tasks after my task heading. So insert after hash task, because that's the markdown format for heading. I also want to add a capture format. So I want to add some cue boxes or trigger boxes so I don't have to fiddle around inside of the file. For adding a task, you need to put a dash, bracket, space, bracket, then space, and now we're going to add some quick add specific template information. So value, colon, and I want this to be the task name, so I'm going to call it task name, which will be the name of the box that comes up when I activate this. Then I want to add another value. In this case, I want it to be the priority value. Now, the priorities are emojis, so go to your emoji menu and then comma, and then the next options. There are 4 inside of the tasks plugin, which is high, medium, normal, and low. Normal being empty, which is why there's a comma with an empty space in the middle. Then I want to add a date. Now, in this case, I want it to be a due date, so again, use the emoji menu, add the calendar, then add some template information for the date, because it needs to be a date. And now we're going to name that box due date, comma, and then add the format. And again, because I want all of these plugins to work together, I'm going to use the same format, year, month, day. And that closes out the capture format, but I want the cursor to go to the next line so I don't get tasks on the same line, which is a /n. That's a little bit of regex. So now when we go back to the quick add settings, we can click the lightning. So it's added that quick add to the command palette, so we can hotkey it. You can see in the hotkeys menu, you've got all the quick adds, and there's the new task that we've just created. I could add a hotkey to it, so I can push something on my keyboard to add a new task. But we're going to go through the command palette, and you can see there was an error because I used the wrong brackets. So I'm going to add the curly brackets instead of the normal brackets to make sure that it's actually template information. We love making errors. And now when I go to the command palette and activate that command, so the new task, there's the due date trigger. So the due date, let's say that's not the name of the task, that's a date. So today, then task name, which is another value that we put in. So test 2, there's the priority drop down, and it's added that to today's daily notes of the 14th, and it's added the priority and the date. Now when I go through that again, let's do the command palette, due date, this is where the natural language dates comes in. If I say in 3 days, it's going to do that automatically because of the natural language dates. Task name, task 3, and then a priority. And you can see the due date is the 17th. It's still added the task for today, so on the 14th, but the due is next Tuesday. And that isn't showing in the Tuesday part of the agenda because it's next Tuesday. So we've got the test 2 and Saturday, and then the future tasks on the 17th shows the next Tuesday task. Now, I'm going to use Commander, the other plugin we installed, add a quick add. So we're going to add what we've just made to a commander inside the tab bar, call it new task, change the color to green, so you can see when tab bar settings, green. Now when I look at the tab bar at the top, it says add new task, so I can push it, add the due date, so in 4 days, add the task name, task 4, add the priority, let's just put no priority in there, so it's still added it to today, but it's going to show on the 18th, so it's due on the 18th, which is in the future task section of our agenda. There is a link to this Vault build, past, present, and future Vault builds in the description below.